Welcome to the Youth Pastors Are Pastors Too podcast, recorded in Central Texas, broadcasting to the world. Join your hosts and their weekly guests for insight, advice, guidance, and ideas to help your ministry flourish and help you take care of yourself. Now, with a combined 35 years of ministry experience, your hosts, Jacob Taylor and Jeremy Helms.
So guys, welcome to episode 12? Are we on episode 12?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's episode 12.
Wow, episode 12. That means we've been doing this for 12 weeks.
12 weeks, and 12 divided by 4 that's like 3 months.
3 months.
Wow.
I think the only commitment I've had longer than 3 months is my marriage. So,
That's right. That's right.
Jeremy, how are you doing this week?
You know, I think it's been an interesting week. I got to see some old friends yesterday, and we got to play with some sound systems and fix a few things, and just catch up a little bit, you know. And that was a lot of fun. I love tinkering with sound systems, and I love troubleshooting. Just, you know, what's wrong with this? Why did the monitors work?
Yeah.
And just, you know, figuring out why they don't work, you know?
Yeah.
So I love doing that. It's fun. I don't know why.
You like problem solving. You like the stress of trying to figure it out.
Well, I have found out that I do work pretty well under pressure. You know, we did this mission trip one time, and we raced down to a prison to do like a worship set and then like present the gospel deal. I didn't even know we were doing it, but they got us in there and they were like, "You've got 15 minutes to set up," and I was just like, "Okay, we're good." You know, it's like 15 minutes.
Some people can't do it. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So that's going on, and then continue to take care of my wife. We are like on the countdown for getting this cast off, and so we're hoping next Tuesday she gets the cast off. Yeah, it's really close, and you know, hopefully it's all healed up and we get this cast off and we're good to go. So, well, what's going on with you? I know you had a fundraiser this past weekend. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but what's going on with you, Jacob?
I'm more than happy to talk about the fundraiser.
Well, I think you should.
Well, we had barbecue, and if you live in Texas, most of Texas, you know that it's rained every day, and it was. I can't say we weren't outside the whole time while we were cooking it on Saturday.
Yeah.
But while we were out there, man, the rain was just it was coming down sideways. And
what? Yeah, it was. I mean, it was pretty crazy. Hey, can I add a side note real quick?
Yeah.
One of my Canadian friends yesterday told me that they went to Home Depot this past weekend and they bought a barbecue.
They bought a barbecue?
They bought a barbecue. That's what they called it. I didn't know that's what it was called.
Okay. Well,
that was it. I digress. Tell us about the rainstorm.
We cooked 4 briskets, smoked 4 briskets all day Saturday. Called it a night about 9 o'clock, and then headed home. My wife was out of town she was spending time with her sisters and her friends, and so I had the house to myself, which sounds great. But when I got home, I fell straight asleep, and then had to turn around and be back at the church to cook the chicken and sausage early Sunday morning, so it would be all fresh for Sunday lunch. And again, it was raining on Sunday morning, but it was well worth it. We had a goal of $1,300 to cover just the bus. We were hoping just to get enough money to cover the van. We don't own a church van or anything. We were just hoping to get enough to rent the van for the week. And the thing about my church is they will give, and they will give until I made the announcement Sunday morning. And I said, guys, I'm going to be real honest with you. if we don't make the goal, we're going to have to do more fundraisers. And I'm getting too old to keep doing this all the time. So I don't know if that worked or not, but we ended up raising $2,400 just from Saturday, from Sunday, which brings the total of the whole fundraiser. People were donating afterwards to like $3,500. And that means that every student that signs up for camp this year will not have to pay anything. So I think out of the 5-6 years that we've done fundraisers, this is the most we've ever raised in one event. And is actually less people in church because of the weather. There was only like 50 people in church. That means 50 people donated $2,400. And I'm not gonna go into detail, but I could see who, obviously on checks you see their names and just like, wow. Like, I think checks alone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right.
With the checks alone raised the $1,300, then it's all the cash, and I was just mind blown. I'm super stoked that the kids don't have to pay. That means anybody that wants to go can go without any worries. And it was just a good. I had a good time smoking briskets. It's always a good time to hang out with the boys, smoke some briskets. We watched the PGA Tour on the Sanctuary TVs. In between like checking everything, and I love Phil Mickelson, and it was a joy to watch him do that. Then we watched the Astros lose, and
they lost to the Rangers, didn't they?
Yeah. Well,
hey, is Tiger Woods back?
No, he was in a car wreck about 2 months ago.
Well, I know he was in a car wreck, but I mean, that guy's like invincible as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think this one got him, though. I think this car wreck's going to be... He may come back, but I think this one's going to take a little bit of time to get back.
Yeah, so. Well, I mean, that makes sense. So, that's lots of memories watching him play.
Yeah.
He obviously really good.
Yeah.
For those of you who aren't golf fans, Tiger Woods is really good.
Phil Mickelson is left-handed, and I'm also left-handed. The only reason I ever decided to play golf was because I watched Phil Mickelson play because he was left-handed. And so
I'll be honest with you. I thought Phil Mickelson was like 70.
That's Jack Nicklaus.
But he's just like, but ever since I've been watching golf, Phil's been around.
He's been around a long time. He's like 40. He's the oldest guy to ever win a championship, and I think he was like 49 in 11 months. I don't know why they have to break it down like that, but I guess they do. But yeah,
I mean, he's still 49.
He's still making more money than I am. So.
My goodness. Well, man, that's lovely. I mean, just lovely to know the kids. If they want to go, you go.
Yeah. And we have 12 spots for students this year, so hopefully we can fill every one of them. I know there's a lot interested and ready to go, especially since this year's they get to go to camp and not us showing up with melted ice cream.
Well, the first few kids that we did online camp last year, Jacob and I together. We went from house to house in the afternoon, and we delivered ice cream one day because I didn't. I'll be honest with you, Jacob. You planned to deliver ice cream.
I did. I thought it would work better with a Yeti cooler.
Did we have a Yeti cooler?
Yeah, we used my Yeti cooler.
I guess I don't remember it was a Yeti. Anyways. The first two students got ice cream. The last three got
milkshakes. I don't even know. It wasn't even. So it was like ice cream, milkshakes, milk.
You're watching the video. We poured it from the half gallon into the cup or cone.
Yeah, it was. I don't think. Yeah. So, but
it was.
The snow cones were a big hit too.
The snow cone.
Mm-hmm. They're actually sitting right there. I'm like, man, I should have snow cones for church tonight, but that's a lot of work, and
Why not?
I might just go get myself one.
Hey, can I make a shout out? Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean,
I want to make a shout out to Kelsey. What's up, Kelsey? Hope you're having a great day.
Yeah. Kelsey is like the secret producer.
Shopper.
I don't know what you mean. She's like the producer or director. Every week she watches. She's like the one consistent person on YouTube that watches. So shout out to looking at our ugly faces every week. But then she sends back ideas, and we're like, okay, we write. I write them down. I don't have that notebook. That notebook's at home, but I have the notebook of Kelsey ideas, and we're definitely taking them and working with them and planning out a show. And
I mean, it's surprising that we've actually had 12 ideas so far.
No, I don't know where they come from, and Kelsey's ideas do help get us through and bring up other ideas. Like she says one thing, I'm like, okay, well, let's add this, and then I mentioned this in the interview with our guest that we are working on like a series of women in ministry, women like wives and women that are in the ministry, and she suggested that after we talked about it, and we're like, well, that just confirms it that this needs to happen. So
oh yeah, it was interesting. I talked to my wife about potentially being a guest in that series, and she didn't say yes or no necessarily, but she did say, well, I've got 2 recommendations for you.
okay.
So, hey, whether she wants to be on the show or not, I can't confirm or deny, but she did say at least she has some candidates maybe. So
well, my wife says she's all in for it. So
all right, cool.
We'll have to
well, don't we have a guest today?
We do. We have a guest. His name is Jared. He's the host of a podcast. It's Let's Take the Taboo Out of Mental Health podcast. Great. If you're interested to see what he's talking about, you might at this point pause our podcast and go check out an episode of his. If you want to know Jared more, his first 2 episodes are just about why he's doing what he's doing, how he got where he was at, and all the episodes are great. I've listened for a couple of weeks now, and just a great thing, and that's why we brought him on, is because of he was a pastor. He's still considered a pastor, but he had mental health issues that not forced him, but he decided he needed to step down and take care of himself, take care of his family, and as pastors or worship leaders or youth pastors or anybody in ministry, I think he's a perfect example of. And he had suggestions on how to take care of ourselves mentally and physically to continue the ministry and where we're at. And it was one of my favorite discussions. We could have gone. I was looking at the timer. If you've never done podcasts, there's a timer that tells you how long you've been recording. And me and him, we were just talking, and I looked down and it's at 38 minutes. I went, oh no, that's like a long podcast, but it's not going to feel like a long podcast. He just a super nice dude, great insight on dealing with the mental health of the ministry and how to come out of it and how to take care of yourself. And his wife might come on during that Women of Ministry series that. Just to talk about her side of being on, the whole story thing. So, yeah. Why don't we just jump right into it? Hey, guys, on the line. What are we going to call the hotline today? Let's see. I got one. This one's for my wife. Amanda Taylor hotline is Jared. Jared, welcome to our podcast. Have you ever been on a different podcast other than your own?
I've been on one before, but it's been a little while, so this is a cool treat. I appreciate you guys having me on.
All right, cool. Well, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Jared Cash. I currently live in the San Antonio area, but just recently accepted a job in Washington State. So my family's going to be moving out in just about 2 or 3 weeks. So we're packing all of our stuff up, getting ready. But I have a wife, Jessica, and 2 little ones, Juliet and Adeline, who are 4 and 1. So fun, tiring ages. And then, I'm not sure what else you want me to jump into at this point, but
I'd like to hear a little bit of background. I think you were a youth pastor. Is that right?
Yeah. So I worked as a youth pastor at 2 different churches, one outside of Dallas and one outside of Austin. And so did that, and actually got connected with Jacob during my one when I worked at Mancheck Baptist Church outside of Austin, and did that. And then God opened up the door, felt called to do a church plant. So in a city called Schertz outside of San Antonio, my family moved, and we planted a church called Impact Church, which is still going, and pastored there for almost 4 years.
So you've been all over the spectrum, from the youth ministry into the church plant, and
yeah,
that's awesome. So the reason we have Jared on today is because he hosts a podcast about mental health, and in ministry, I think that's the biggest thing. And he uses. I've listened to most of his episodes, and it focuses on what it's like. Let's lose the taboo of mental health. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, the name of it's Lose the Taboo on Mental Health.
And I mean, just the title by itself, because, when you hear mental health, you're just like, ooh, something's wrong with that person. And everybody goes through it. And that's why I think you're the perfect guest for this subject, because you're pretty open about it on your podcast. Can you tell us why you started the podcast and what got you to that point?
Yeah, I've gotten to the place where I've really put myself out there. So it was kind of scary at first, put myself out there with mental health, but just received a lot of affirmation and just knew that it was the right thing. But I'd always dealt with mental illness ever since I was in high school, dealt with depression and anxiety. And so those were always there. Some seasons of life worse than others, but it was always this kind of constant struggle, could never quite overcome it. And it was pretty sustainable, though, for the times that I worked in ministry and had a family. But when I started the church plant, we had our second child was born pretty early on in pastoring that. And then COVID took place. And as anyone knows, the whole, everything changed. But church ministry changed in a way that no one was expecting. And so there was just so many curveballs with that I just got to the place where kind of more and more my mental health was getting worse and worse. And it got to a place during that season where I just got so low and so anxious and was just always on the verge of anxiety attack or panic attack, and just in a low place of depression. And it got to where I thought, I need to, after talking to my wife, I need to step away from pastoring right now, because it's not good for me. It's not good for my family. It's not good for the church if I'm not in a healthy place mentally. So I went ahead and talked to our leaders at the church and was able to step away. And I didn't just jump right into another job. My wife was working, and I had some time being a kind of a stay-at-home dad, but also just kind of figuring out how can I make myself the healthiest I can be mentally. And so I did that. And during that time, God put it on my heart, start a podcast. I have a unique story. It was still fresh, but a story with ministry, but then also just mental health really was exposed how during COVID, just how serious it is and how many people deal with mental health issues. And so I just felt called to speak on it, and by no means an expert, but just trying to just get the conversation going to where people feel encouraged that they're not alone, and then just kind of help remind people that Jesus is in the middle of even mental illness. And so that's been my goal. I've had on some guests, my doctor, a counselor before, and different guests, just to because mental health is such a broad, complicated topic. And so just trying to break it down the best I can. But God also put on my heart, I'm about to be releasing it soon, but I also wrote a devotional book called Live Fully, Love Freely with Mental Illness.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a devotional book for those that struggle with mental illness or have a loved one that does. So I'm going to be releasing that probably in about a month and a half. So yeah, just this season has been a unique season of just God speaking and working in my life. And he's done quite a bit in these past 6, 7, 8 months.
Cool. So you said you were at the church plant when I think we all been through the COVID exhaustion, just because especially me personally, I was doing devotions every day. I was doing videos every day for 4 months, and I was just exhausted. And you don't have to answer this, but did your mental health affect what you were doing at the church?
Yeah, it felt like it got to the place where I was so focused on just trying to not collapse under my mental illness that, I think I still was able to get the things done that I needed to done, but I wasn't always present in the moment. And that's something that's always big with me, is being present in the moment when talking with people. And it got to the place where that was a struggle. And that was kind of one of the big things that I noticed.
Yeah, I would think of those times, especially this past year. It was just the motions. Those times where we were just going through the motions.
Yeah.
And, you kind of miss out on opportunities when you do that. And, I think as youth ministers and pastors or any church person or that's in the ministry had to deal with at some point that not being there, but just doing the motions, not being there. So that's that's a good. I didn't really think about that until you just said it. We were just going through the motions really and not actually being present. And man, that's good. So,
I think people start to pick up on that. They can start to see that there's not that freshness, there's not that being present, and so it's, whether it's COVID or not, it's really easy to get where you're going through the motions, but that's a dangerous place to be, because lots of times that leaves God out of the picture, where we're not seeing where he's moving and where he's working.
Yeah, just focused trying to get through that day or whatever. So, as you're now a pastor, about to go back into pastor, as leaders of a church, do you think we suffer differently than most people because of our position, or do we? Because some people do kind of look at it as above, not that we're above people, but we're on a pedestal, and is it harder? I guess I can ask it this way: is it harder to realize that, hey, this is something that I'm dealing with, and I need to keep people away from it, and not let people know, or do I finally needed to say, hey, this is me, I'm real. Why do we do that? Why do we try to hold ourselves above on the pedestal, knowing that we're just like everybody else that just has a different calling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's extremely difficult for those that are in ministry when it comes to mental health. I think, first of all, as you guys know, and anyone that's worked in ministry, there's just a different weight that comes with pastoring in any aspect of the church. When you're ministering to students and their parents, or you're ministering to adult ministry, or as a lead pastor, whatever it is, there's just a weight because of the spiritual sense. You're not just clocking in and clocking out. This is a job that is affecting people's eternity. This is the greatest thing that they can either figure out or they can ignore. And so there's just a pressure that comes with that anyway. So there's that added weight on your shoulders of hey, I'm helping people discover more about God. But then there's also that your life is very public. It's kind of one of those that you're like a small celebrity, where people see different aspects of your life that normally you could hide a lot easier, or wouldn't necessarily be seen in another career. And it is really difficult, because as a leader of a church or leader of a ministry, you want to feel like people can trust that you know what you're doing, and that you're in a place that you can actually lead, and to admit, hey, I'm struggling with mental illness. It makes you feel like, well, what if they don't actually think I'm capable of leading? What if all of a sudden I'm pushed to the side because I'm not in a place that I can lead? And so it's really scary. And that's why a lot of people, and I did, just push through it in an unhealthy way, because just the fear of, how is everyone going to take this? How is everyone going to interact with this knowledge of, hey, I'm dealing with mental health issues?
Yeah. How hard was it for you to admit and then step down?
It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I'd say it was, I had poured so much of myself into this church plant, and had given everything. I loved this group of people, and it was difficult because I knew there were things I could have done to help get my mental health in a better place, that I just kind of pushed through, like I said, and I kept going, and I didn't do some of the things that would have helped take care of my mental health. And so making that decision to actually step down was super difficult. And here again, just the worries of the tension of, what are people going to think, and what is my family going to, how is this going to look for my family? That was my way of supporting my family. And so there was just something that I just knew deep down, I am not going to ever be able to be the person that God wants me to be if I don't step away and take some time to just heal and to re-energize myself mentally. So it was one of the hardest things, but it was definitely what I needed to do. And I haven't had any doubts about that since I stepped down.
Yeah. How was the church support? Was your church like supportive of it, and they understood, or was there a lot of back, people weren't real happy with?
We had people egging our cars for weeks.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Oh, I was like, dang.
No, man, everyone was so sweet and so supportive. I had been open about mental health beforehand. I had preached a couple sermons on it. We had talked about it as leaders. I had encouraged people with seeing a counselor. And so it was something that people were aware that was a struggle of mine that I'd been very open with. And so for our leaders, our key leaders, I was keeping them updated kind of weeks leading up of the place that I was in and where I was going. And so those leaders, when I finally made that decision, hey, I need to step down, they were just like, okay, let's figure out how to make this transition really smooth for you and make this transition healthy for you and your family, but then also the church. And so the leaders were so gracious, and then the people just showed more support than I could have ever imagined. And, I think they just appreciated that I was real and I was honest. And instead of just saying, I've got to step down, explaining why, people, they respond really well to authenticity. And so just being real and being vulnerable and allowing people to kind of know a little bit of where my life was, I think helped them know that they weren't, didn't have to be mad, but they could actually help support me kind of in my next chapter of life.
So once you stepped down, what was those first couple of weeks like? What was your daily time with God like? What did you do? How did you basically come out of where you were at?
Yeah, I had started going back to see my counselor, who I'd seen before, within the first couple weeks of stepping down. And one thing that she encouraged me with was to get away for a week. So I got away for about 4 days and just spend that time doing a couple different things. First of all, just journaling my thoughts. And so I just got out and I just spent time and just listened to God and just talked with God and just wrote up my thoughts. And I wrote a letter. She said to write myself a letter of what I felt like God was wanting to tell me. And so I addressed it like, Dear Jared, as if God was writing this letter, and just these truths of God and things that were ultimately the most important thing about being his child, about my identity being him, just were pouring out as I wrote this prayer from God to me. And she had me write a letter to myself from my daughter's viewpoint of just what they wanted from their daddy. And, it was just a lot of writing, and it was a lot of just praying. And, I walked before that week. I was in such a strange place where I was confused. I was a little bit angry with God, but it was like after that week, and I just was reminded of his truths, got me to where I was saying, I've got to depend on God during this time. And he didn't leave me out to dry. This is part of his plan. And so it was after that point that I started saying, well, let me just read the word of God. Not, it's a struggle whenever you're in ministry to read, thinking, how's this going to relate to my students, or how's this going to relate to my church? But then just to read and say, what is God trying to tell me? How is he speaking to me? And I started doing that, and it was just a game changer for me, of just being reminded of these truths of God and helping me remember what's most important in life and how I can place my trust in God and feel secure in that. And so it was a different transition, and luckily the church was really gracious and gave me several months of pay, so my wife and I didn't have to work. And so she was able, there was points, just about every day that I would go out to my office, which I'm in right now, and just write some devotional thoughts for my devotion or record my podcast. And that was a really good time of healing for me. And so I was able to do that, but then just spend a lot of time with my family.
Cool. So with your time that you took off, do you think if you would have done, and I don't know if you did this or not, but those certain things that you were doing, like writing and taking 4 days to get away, you think if you would have done that while you were still doing the church plant, that it might have not got to that point, or this was just going to happen? Like, it was going to happen. This is what needed to happen. And that you, like, if you were so focused, I can imagine, I've never done a church plant, but I can imagine your focus, that you want this church to grow. You want to bring in people. You want to share the gospel with people that aren't usually going to hear it, that you kind of forgot that, hey, I do need to take these 4 days off. I do need to write down a letter, or I need to read God's word that's directed towards me. Do you think if you would have done that while still doing the church plant, that maybe it didn't get to the point where you needed to step away?
I think if I would have done that early on and continue to do that those years, I don't know if a couple months of it would have made a big enough of a difference. But if I would have done that from the start and just not allowed the pressure and the weight, because it was just with the church plant, it was always difficult to shut my brain off, of I'm done working now and I need to just focus on myself and my family. There was always those thoughts of, what else do I need to do for the church? Or there's that person that needs help. And so it was really hard to not get so wrapped up in my ministry, even though it's a great thing, but it got to an unhealthy place. And if I would have from the start been really intentional to not allow that to happen, to create some more boundaries, to do some things on a regular basis that allowed me to recharge mentally, I think it definitely could have been avoided. And that's why it's never too soon to put some things in place for your mental health, for a minister, whether they've dealt with it in the past or not, because those steps early on can make a huge difference, I believe.
Yeah, and that's why I asked. I was like, if someone's listening and they're like, man, I'm getting to that point, and maybe they're not in a position where they can take, some time off, and they just need to, they're not quite where a lot of us get when we have those mental things, that, hey, there are things that we can do, just like with what you did. There's things that we can do that will also keep us from getting to that point. And I think that's encouraging to let other people know like what works for you, and that maybe it would have helped if it was something that we implemented early on, like in your ministry. And I think some of the things I really relate to when you said that we read the word when we're trying to put it to what our students are saying or our church members, but we don't really read it. Sometimes we don't. Most of the time, we don't read it for ourselves, and we get wrapped up in trying to do that. And that was a good point. That we just have to stop and read it for ourselves, and sometimes just kind of say, "Hey, students, this is my time." And my wife's real good about noticing when I need to get away. A couple right after about halfway through COVID, she was like, "You need to go away, get out." And I went to the beach for 3 days by myself, and I went fishing by myself for 3 solid days, and didn't really catch much, but the time just to get away. And I love the ocean. Just to look at the ocean and to see what God created, and that there's so much beyond just what you see like in the first couple miles, that I felt like that I was spending my time with God while I was just sitting there fishing. And time off is, I think, one of the biggest things that we forget to do, especially if you're like in myself, I'm bivocational. You can get wrapped up in, you got your daily job, and then you come home and you work on church stuff. Like this week, I'm getting prepared for camp, all the paperwork for camp, and you come home and you work, and then you're like, okay, go to bed, do it again the next day. And it might not seem it at the time, but that's going to take effect on your mental health later down on the road, especially right before summer. Like summer's packed. Like if you're listening, I encourage you. You have to take time off. You got to take time to take care of yourself, and not just yourself, but you have your family. How was your family throughout the whole thing? I met your wife's. Did you know your wife used to work with my mom for a brief time?
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, she when she worked for the Bastrop ISD for a brief time. That my mom was the secretary for the special ed department, and
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yeah, everything had to go through my mom because she was the director's secretary, and they worked a little bit together. But she seemed real nice the few times that I met her. How was she during all of it, leading up to it, and your time off, and getting back into the ministry?
Yeah. By the way, if anyone's watching the video, sorry, I'm sweating terrible. I have to turn my air conditioner off because it's so loud out here. So it is like burning up in here.
Oh man.
But yeah, Jessica was really, really supportive during it. She was really worried about me. The times when I got up to the very end before I stepped down, things got to a place where I started to notice a difference in my daughter, who was 3 or 4 at that time. And it really started to where she was being affected by it. She could tell the anxiety I was dealing with. She could tell that Daddy was in a strange place. And so, there was a time, I've said on my podcast before, there's a time when she was told by my mom, her grandmother, I want to go ride my bike for Daddy because I think that will make him feel happy. And it was like, man, that ripped me apart, just knowing that where the place I was in was taking a toll on my family. And that was one of the biggest things that made me realize something's got to change whenever my family was being affected. And Jessica was having to take on more with her role at home and with things around the house. And it's like I was just trying to survive, and she was having to take on more. So it took a toll on her, but she knew that was something she had to do in that period. And so when it finally got to the place where I was like, I've got to step down, Jessica could have had every reason to be like, well, what in the world are we going to do? How are we going to survive? But she was like, yes, it sounds like this is what you need to do. And so she was really good about that period afterwards of allowing me to do what I needed to do. like I said, go to counseling. I had a lot of doctor appointments. I took that week away, and she knew that taking on some extra stuff in the short term was going to help tremendously in the long run. And so, that's something else I encourage anyone is taking care of your mental health looks different for almost everybody. For you, getting away and going to the beach was huge for you. It allowed you to be able to really connect with God and to be able to kind of take a load off of your shoulders. But for someone, going to the beach may not be a relaxing thing, so it's like, you got to figure out, how has God wired me? What is actually something that's going to help me improve my mental health? And then being willing to do things like counseling. I'm a huge supporter of counseling. Whether you feel like you're in a place where you need it or not, it's just so beneficial. So doctor visits, just all these things. You just have to try a lot of things to figure out what's going to help maintain and improve your mental health.
Yeah. So we'll start wrapping it up, because I can tell that it's hot where you're at.
No, we're good. I'm good, man. I can talk as long as you want to.
How did you know you were ready to start looking to go back
into ministry?
Yeah.
Honestly, I almost, in the beginning, I thought I probably don't need to do a job in ministry. That was kind of my initial thought of, I need to have a season where I'm not working in ministry and just kind of attending a church. And so that was my goal, and that's kind of what I was looking for, and looking for jobs and that kind of thing. But it just more and more, I just felt like, man, working in a church is something that I feel God has called me to, and he could use me in another career path. But I just felt like, man, I have something unique with this mental health aspect that I can bring to the people that I serve, the people that I live life with in the context of church. And so I felt like that's where I was supposed to be, and I had a message to share. I would be able to connect with people in a different way. And so Jessica was really supportive of either way, if I wanted to go into ministry or not. And so we just prayed about it and talked about it a lot, and ended up looking for some jobs, and found one that at a church that I could tell was doing things right, in a role that was, I'm going to be a campus pastor. So I'm going to be the pastor of a campus, but not the lead pastor of the whole church. And just not having that pressure of initially stepping into a lead pastor role is going to be a healthy thing for me. And so we just wanted to find the right role at the right church, and we feel like that's what we've got with Timberlake Church.
Cool. So tell us a little bit more about your podcast, and I guess like advertise it. Like how what are your goals with it, and what are your plans for it?
Yeah, the podcast Lose the Taboo of Mental Health. I got to the place where I just do episodes about once a month, not as regular as I want. But I do once a month. I try to, about every other episode, bring on a guest that has dealt with some aspect of mental illness, whether that's anxiety or bipolar or OCD, or someone that's an expert in the field in some way. And so I try to bring on guests as much as I can. But then there's some episodes where I do a short episode with just me talking about something God had put on my heart, or something that I've learned along the way. So my goal is really to create a community where people can be reminded on a regular basis that they are not alone, that there's others who are walking through similar journeys as them, and then help to hopefully equip people to take some different practices or take some different insights and to apply it to their life, and to have the conversations they need to with their loved ones, and do the necessary steps to take care of their mental health. And then while doing all of that, just helping remind people that Jesus is in control, and that Jesus he's not given us more than we can handle and he can handle. And so that's kind of my goal with the podcast. And so I'm going to keep doing episodes at least once a month, and just kind of see who God brings along to to be on the podcast and what he exactly wants to do with it. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm really excited. I love doing the podcast.
So is it on Apple podcasts?
Yeah, it's on most streaming platforms. So Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio.
Okay.
I just don't have the video part of it on YouTube. That's something I'm hoping to add. We were talking about earlier, hoping to add at some point. But any audio streaming platforms pretty much are my website, jaredcash.com. You can find episodes and some resources and things there.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Is there resources and ways to connect on your website?
Yeah. There's some resources about suicide prevention, anxiety. Of course, the podcasts are on there. Mm-hmm. I've got also a contact page if you want to reach out and ask questions or just want some encouragement. There's a place where you can send me an email off of there. So just want people to just know that there's others who support them and love them and kind of know at least a little bit of what they might be walking through.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I really enjoyed the podcast. And
thanks, man.
You invited me a couple of months ago on the Facebook, and I was like, another podcast. And but for some reason I was like, I need something to listen to, and I was like, oh, Jared sent me an invite to the page, and I listened to it, and I'm like, man, this is awesome. Actually, believe it or not, me and Jeremy have been talking about making a podcast for years. Mm-hmm. And then after listening to yours, I was like, yeah, we got to do this. There's no reason why we can't. And so we started it. And so
you're like, if this guy can handle it, we can definitely do it.
And you have the same idea and goal that we kind of have. And you want to help people and know that we're all in the same position, dealing with the same things in a way. Everybody has their own way, different things going on. And we just want to encourage ministers or ministry people, not just youth ministers, but everybody that's in the ministry that, and guide them and help them know that they're not alone and they're not on this island by themselves. And mental health has a huge thing to do with that. And we greatly appreciate you coming on and telling your story and being open about it and not being afraid that people. I mean, I would assume that at first, and I think you mentioned it, that you're afraid people are going to judge you for it, and you stepped out and you put it all up on the table when you started the podcast, and it's awesome that you made time for us to come, and you're sitting in the hot box, and I didn't know how this episode would go, but man, this is, especially for me personally, it opened up some things that, sometimes you just have to hear it so you can like just see like, hey, I need to do this, need to do that, and hey, maybe that's what's going on. And again, thank you for coming on. And
thank you for having me.
Before we wrap this up, we ask 2 questions on every episode. What was the last song you intentionally looked up, like on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or whatever? And the second question is, what is the craziest story you have in ministry?
Which, by the way, before I answer those, I love what you guys are doing. I was telling you earlier, but this podcast is so needed, and I'm so thankful that you guys are doing this. I think it's already making a difference, and it's going to make a difference for a lot of people. So thanks for listening to God's calling on that.
Well, thank you.
For me, the last song that I looked up is probably, I'm trying to think, I worked out this morning, and so I was listening to YouTube stuff. What was it? Oh, man. I listened to a cover of Blank Space by Taylor Swift. It was by a kind of punk band.
I have that on my phone.
This one's by I Prevail, I think.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I have that. I like that. I like that version a lot.
That one gets me so pumped, and so I was listeing to it while I worked out. So sorry, it took me a minute to remember the name of it.
Good.
But Yeah, and then my craziest, one that always sticks out to me is early on. I was a student pastor for summer for a church in San Antonio when I was in college, and so I was just completely new to it. Didn't really know what I was doing. Was just hoping for the best. And early on, I was teaching the youth. It was this really small group. And one of the first times that I taught, a kid fell asleep like to the max, like head back, mouth wide open. And it threw me off so bad. I was already nervous, didn't really know what I was doing. And then there's this guy who's sleeping like he hasn't slept in 4 days. And it just made me think, am I like cut out to do this? Can I actually handle this? And so I learned from it, but it was definitely something that kind of was crazy to me in the moment because I was so early on in ministry.
That's funny. I can't say I've ever had anybody fall asleep, but I can, when I preach like on Sunday mornings, you just look at people's facial expressions and they're just like, what am I doing? Am I doing something wrong? And that's just their face when they're sitting there. And it's like, man, these people are either angry or they don't want me up here.
Yeah, so. I always find a few people like in different parts of the room that I know are going to have good expressions. And I just like focus on those people when I preach now because, yeah, it can throw you off when you see someone who's got a face that looks like they're angry or something. So
I'm going to have to keep that. I'm preaching next Sunday. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to note that down. Look at the people that you know are going to always, no matter what kind of mood they're in, they're going to be smiling. So
yeah.
Where can we reach you or follow you or keep up with where you're going and stuff?
Yeah. So on Instagram, I should know this. I think it's just at Jared Cash. I'm pretty sure. Okay. And then I post a lot of stuff on Facebook, Jared Cash. So I don't know if there's a better way to find it, but those are the two things. And then there's a newsletter that I send out. If you go on my website, jaredcash.com, you can sign up for a newsletter that I send out updates of when new podcast episodes are out or new blog posts, that kind of thing. So those are kind of the best ways to keep up with what's happening with Lose the Taboo on mental health.
Cool. So any last word you want to encourage anybody with?
Yeah, my biggest encouragement would be don't feel ashamed and don't feel selfish to take care of yourself mentally and physically, all those things, spiritually, emotionally. It's one of the most selfless things you can do because it will allow you to make a much bigger difference in the lives of the people around you. So that's my encouragement. Loved getting the opportunity to be able to be on here with you. And like I said, I love what you're doing.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and we'll probably have you on again in the future.
I'd love that.
Wrap around. We are working on, spoiler alert for listeners, women of ministry, and focused on like wives of ministers, and maybe we can get your wife on to talk about her side of what your story. And
that's awesome.
So
definitely
cool. So yeah, thanks for being here. And if you need a guest on your podcast, I know we can make that work. So
yeah, man, that'd be awesome. I'll definitely hit you up about that.
That was an excellent interview. That you're right. It didn't feel like it was 40 minutes long or however long it was. It was just so, I think, more relevant than many of us realize. Because, and not only just, pre-pandemic, middle of pandemic, post-pandemic, just taking care of your mental health is very important, not only for you and your family, but also for your congregation.
Yeah, and we talked about it a little bit about how things like that just kind of sneak up on you, and sometimes you just need to hear someone say, "Hey, this is what was happening to me," to realize, "Hey, that's me. That's exactly what I'm going through." And I told Jared after we got off recording that just for him to put himself out there to especially in our and we talked about a little bit that we're on like this unofficial platform as ministers that are leading other people and he said, and I never put two and two together, but he said local rock stars that people look up to us, and that we get to a point where we can't admit to ourselves that we are struggling with something. And we don't, and without having someone saying something that we sometimes don't see it. We in the beginning, he talks about just getting into the motions. We discussed that, but we get into the motion of everything, and we kind of forget not to be present. And it's easy to get into that thing. And it was just good to. He said a lot of things that I'm going to take home with me and remember. And it's, I think it's something that every person that listens to this podcast, every person that doesn't listen but needs to listen, needs to hear. And everybody just needs to check out his podcast. And
what was the name of that podcast again?
Take taboo out of mental health. He mentions it a couple of times, and he has a website and all that stuff. So
well, you say it as many times, right?
Yeah, let's get it out there. I guess we could have done the hotline, his podcast. We should have done it. We should have done that. Dang.
Well, what can you do? What can you do?
Great ideas come after they need them. So
yeah, it's all good. Well, and let me just tag this. I think Jacob and I saw not only the value in his podcast and where he comes from, where he is now, where he's going, but because our community is this, our arms are open, going, if you need some help, we're not licensed counselors or psychs or anything like that, but either A, we're going to find it, or B, we're going to listen to you, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, man, 12 weeks. We've been doing this 12 weeks, and 12 weeks, and to top it off with this episode, but like we said in the intro, and I mentioned it in the interview, Women of Ministry series is coming up. Still working on that, so it's not like next week or anything, but it's definitely
process. In the works.
Yeah,
it's in the works.
Ladies, we haven't forgot about you. We know how important you are, and every episode leading up to, everything. The most important thing that comes out of it is how important the wives are, and we all know that the world wouldn't turn without women. So
that's right. That's right.
We want to show the light on y'all, and so y'all can have your own community of women in ministry. And but that's a work in progress as we line everything up, and it's coming. So
there you go.
You got anything else you need to add or promote?
The only thing I would just tag the email address. Youth pastors are pastors 2, TOO. Youth pastors are 2. Youth pastors are pastors 2, TOO at gmail.com. So drop us a line. If you're listening and you thought maybe you got something to bring to the table, you want to be a guest on the show, shoot us an email. I don't even think I've mentioned that on the show just yet, but I think it's relevant. So, you think you could bring something to the table, we would love to hear from you. Drop us an email. So.
Also, if you would like T-shirts, we're still holding that poll open to see if anybody would buy T-shirts to raise some money for Jeremy's audio, because he's behind the times.
Oh, sheesh. At least I have a microphone, right?
You do have a microphone. You have headphones. You have everything.
It could just be better.
It just needs to be better.
It could just be better.
But,
well, listen. 12 weeks straight. You want to do it again next week and make it 13?
Sure.
Thank you for listening to the Youth Pastors Are Pastors Too podcast. Find us, rate us, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. If you want to see our ugly faces, look for us on YouTube. While you're at it, give us a like on Facebook. See you next week.